Hey everyone, we're working hard to get our first 1,000 subscribers, sign up and you won't regret it. If you're going to fall for someone half your age, the world doesn't let you do it quietly. They don't whisper. They don't wait until you're out of earshot. They say it in that bright, casual tone people use when they're trying to pretend they're not judging you. Must be nice. Good for you. Hope she's not, you know. I'm 60. I have the kind of hairline that stopped negotiating years ago and knees that predict rain more accurately than the weather app. I also have money, enough that people assume it's the only thing about me that's still working. Her name was Jade. She said she was 30. She had that rare mix of warmth and sharpness, eyes that locked onto yours like you were the only person in the room, and a laugh that made strangers lean in like they'd been invited. We met at a fundraiser for the community college scholarship program. I'm on the board. I'd been doing that sort of thing since my wife, Marianne, passed 3 years earlier. It gave me structure. It gave me a reason to put on a blazer and pretend I wasn't eating cereal for dinner. Jade wasn't a donor or a social climber, at least not obviously. She was working the event, coordinating volunteers, shuffling silent auction sheets, fixing problems before anyone noticed. I watched her for an hour before I talked to her, partly out of curiosity and partly because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be curious about a person instead of a stock portfolio. When I finally introduced myself, she didn't do the thing younger women sometimes do around older men, either overly polite like I'm someone's father, or overly flirty like they're performing. She was normal. Present. Like I was a man, not a category. I found out later she was recently divorced. No kids. She'd moved to our city from out of state and was building a life from scratch. She said it matter-of-factly, not like a sob story. What she didn't say was what she got out of talking to me. That should have been my first warning. For the first month, it was harmless. Coffee after meetings. A walk by the river. A movie where we both pretended we weren't exhausted by the time the previews ended. Then it shifted. Not dramatically. Quietly. She started texting earlier in the day. She started telling me small things, what she cooked, what she noticed, what made her think of me. I hadn't been anyone's person in a long time. It sneaks up on you. When she first said, "I love you," it wasn't during a candlelit dinner or after some big romantic speech. It was at my house, standing in my kitchen, while I was trying to open a jar like my pride wasn't on the line. She said it like she was admitting something she'd tried not to feel. I stood there with the jar in my hands, stupidly frozen, like any sudden tenderness was going to break me. A part of me wanted to ask the obvious question, why? Another part of me, the part that had been lonely long enough to start bargaining with reality, decided to just accept it. My son, Caleb, did not accept it. Caleb is 35. Smart. Successful. Protective in that way grown sons become when they realize their father is mortal and, worse, lonely. He didn't yell. He didn't insult her. That almost would have been easier. He asked questions. How did you meet? What does she do exactly? Why is she interested in you? He said it like he was trying to protect me from getting ripped off by a contractor, not from getting ripped apart emotionally. I told him to back off. I told him he was projecting. I told him I wasn't a helpless old man with a wallet. The truth is, I was insulted because some part of me also wondered why she was interested in me, and I hated that my own doubt had Caleb's voice. The next few months were the happiest I'd been since Marianne died. Jade moved through my life like she belonged there. She remembered details. She made me feel noticed. She was affectionate without being performative. She didn't treat my age like a punchline. In private, she made me feel chosen. And when people looked at us in restaurants, when they gave me that look, the one that says I know what this is, Jade would reach for my hand like she was proud to be there. It's embarrassing how much that mattered. The first crack showed up in the form of something small, a notification that flashed across her phone while it was on my counter. A bank alert. Not unusual, except the account name wasn't hers. It was something like Harris & Cole Consulting. I only caught it because I happened to glance down when it lit up. When I asked about it later, casually, she didn't freeze. She didn't panic. She laughed lightly and said it was an old joint account tied to some freelance work. Her tone was smooth enough that I nodded and let it go. But the next week, she was suddenly more protective of her phone. Face down. Always within reach. A new passcode. The kind of small behavior changes that don't prove anything but whisper anyway. At the same time, she started talking about our future in a more concrete way. Not just trips or vague dreams. Real things. Moving in. Combining lives. How nice it would be to simplify finances one day. She said it softly, like she was being practical, not ambitious. When she first mentioned marriage, I felt a wave of something I didn't expect, not excitement, but relief. The idea that I wouldn't die alone in a quiet house. The idea that someone would be here when my body finally started collecting failures. So when she told me, a month later, that she was pregnant, I didn't react like a man who suspects a trap. I reacted like a man who's been given a second life. I sat down at my kitchen table with my hands flat on the wood, trying to breathe. Jade's eyes were glossy. She looked frightened and hopeful at the same time. I remember thinking, she's scared, too. That means it's real. I didn't even question the odds. I didn't count days. I didn't do the math. I held her and told her we'd be okay. That I'd handle everything. That we'd build something. She pressed her face into my shoulder like she'd been waiting for those words. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten for reasons I couldn't name. She said, "Caleb can never know yet. Not until we're ready." And as she said it, her eyes flicked, just once, toward the hallway, toward the room where my family photos lived. Like she wasn't thinking about my son. Like she was thinking about a problem that already existed. That night, when she fell asleep, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. And against my better judgment, against every rule I'd sworn I'd live by after Marianne, I picked it up. The screen lit. One message preview. No name, just a number. "Did you tell him?" My thumb hovered over the screen, and my heart did something I hadn't felt in years. Not heartbreak. Recognition. Because I knew, suddenly, with awful clarity, that whatever was happening in my house wasn't starting tonight. It had been in motion long before Jade ever said she loved me. And I was only just now catching up. I didn't open the message. That sounds noble. It wasn't. It was fear. There are moments where you can either know the truth or keep the version of your life that still makes sense. I stared at that glowing screen like it was a lit match over gasoline. I put her phone back down and lay there listening to my own breathing. The next morning, Jade was normal. That was the worst part. She made coffee. She kissed my cheek. She talked about her appointment with the doctor like we were already a family. Her calmness made my suspicion feel like something ugly inside me, like I was the villain for even thinking it. But the question wouldn't leave, who was texting her at midnight about me? And then there was the pregnancy itself. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be the man who took this news as a miracle instead of a math problem. But I'm 60, not naive. So I did what older men do when their emotions start trying to run the show. I hid behind logistics. I told Jade I wanted to be responsible. I wanted to set up prenatal care properly. I wanted to make sure everything was safe. She agreed quickly, too quickly. When I asked about the doctor's name, she hesitated for half a beat. Then she said it. When I offered to go with her, she smiled and said, "Maybe the next one. Let me just process first." It sounded reasonable. It also sounded rehearsed. I called my attorney that afternoon and asked about a prenup. Not because I was sure she was lying, but because if she was telling the truth, she should understand it. And if she was lying, I needed guardrails. My attorney, Scott, didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'll draft options." Then, as gently as a man can suggest a disaster, he added, "Given the circumstances, you may also want a background check." I didn't answer right away. Because part of me still wanted to protect Jade from my doubt. And part of me wanted to protect myself from Jade. I told Scott to do it. That night, Caleb came over. I hadn't told him about the pregnancy yet. Jade had been clear about that. But Caleb could feel something in the air the way dogs sense storms. He watched me for a long moment, then said, "You're distracted." I almost told him everything. The message. The pregnancy. The way my gut wouldn't settle. Instead, I lied. I said work was busy. Caleb didn't buy it. He looked past me toward the hallway, toward the family photos, like he was trying to understand what had changed in his father's house. Then he said, "Dad? I saw her car last week." I blinked. "What?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "In the parking lot of my building." I didn't think anything of it at first. Maybe it was someone else with the same model. But then I saw her get out. She was talking to someone. My throat tightened. Talking to who? Caleb hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything about how bad his answer would feel. He said, "I couldn't tell. I was across the lot." But she wasn't alone. The room went quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. It was charged, like something was about to break. I tried to keep my voice steady. Maybe she was meeting a friend. Caleb's expression shifted, and I recognized it instantly. He wasn't trying to protect me from Jade anymore. He was trying to protect me from the part of myself that refused to see. He said, "Maybe." Then he left, and I sat there in the dark, staring at my own reflection in the window like it belonged to someone else. The next day, Scott called. His voice was careful. That's how attorneys talk when they're about to hand you a grenade. He said, "Martin, there are inconsistencies." I didn't respond. He continued, "The name she gave you is likely real, but it's not the only one she's used. There are records tied to a different last name in another state." My stomach dropped. He said, also, there's a civil case. Not criminal. But, it involves allegations of fraud connected to an older man. A settlement was reached. My hands went cold. Older man. I tried to speak, but nothing came out right. It felt like my body was trying to protect me by shutting down language. Scott wasn't finished. He said, there's one more thing. I found a connection to someone local. Someone with your last name. For a second, my brain tried to run away from that statement. Like if I pretended I didn't hear it, it couldn't be true. I forced myself to ask, who? Scott said a name I hadn't heard in years. Caleb's mother had been Marianne. There was no secret child, no hidden family. So the name Scott said didn't connect to me through blood. It connected through something worse. It connected through Caleb's life. Scott said, the number that's been contacting her is registered to a plan under Caleb's address. I felt my face go numb. I asked Scott to repeat it, because my ears refused to accept it the first time. He repeated it. And suddenly every odd detail rearranged itself in my head like magnets snapping into place. Jade's insistence that Caleb couldn't know yet. Her car in Caleb's parking lot. The way she moved through my life like she knew the layout already. I told myself the simplest explanation was a misunderstanding. Then I remembered the message preview. Did you tell him? Not did you tell Martin. Did you tell him? Like I was the obstacle. Not the partner. That night, Jade came over with a folder. She said she had paperwork from the clinic. She slid it across the table like she was being helpful, transparent. Like she'd anticipated my need for proof. I looked at the top page. It was a printout with a logo I recognized. Not from our city. From a clinic 2 hours away. My eyes moved over the text, and my heart hammered. Because I knew enough about formatting and medical documents to see what was off. The dates didn't align. The doctor's name didn't match the clinic's directory. And the page looked like it had been printed from a template. I didn't accuse her. I smiled. I nodded. I told her I was proud of her. Then I said, I want us to do one thing the right way. She leaned in, relieved. I said, a paternity test. For peace of mind. For the future. Just to shut everyone up. I watched her face carefully. For half a second, her expression didn't match the emotion she was trying to perform. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. She recovered fast, too fast, and said, of course. Then she reached for my hand and squeezed it. And that's when I realized something chilling. She wasn't scared of the test. She was confident she could control it. So I nodded, and I smiled back. And inside, I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make in my own home. I wasn't going to let her run this. I was going to let her think she was winning, right up until the moment she couldn't. The next week, Jade became the most agreeable person on earth. She brought me vitamins for stress. She talked about baby names like it was a game we played to feel happy. She started hinting about moving in before the baby gets big. Everything she did had a soft urgency to it, like we were on a clock only she could see. I scheduled the paternity test through a reputable lab, one Scott recommended. Chain of custody. Strict ID checks. No room for mix-ups. When I told Jade the date and location, she blinked once. That was all. Then she smiled and said, perfect. But later that night, she stepped outside to take a call. She was out there for a long time. When she came back in, her eyes were bright in a way that didn't feel emotional. It felt energized. Like she'd received good news. The day of the test, I drove us myself. Jade sat in the passenger seat, tapping her nails against her phone case, chatting about a bakery we should try after. Normal. I watched her hands. People lie with their mouths. Their bodies usually tell the truth. Her hands were steady. At the lab, we checked in. They took my ID. They took hers. Jade didn't flinch. Then the technician explained the process. Jade nodded along, calm as a person signing up for a gym membership. As the swab happened, I kept thinking, if she's lying, why isn't she scared? That question haunted me all the way back to my house. Then Scott called that evening. He said, Martin, I need you to come in tomorrow. And I need you to be careful. Something in my chest tightened. I asked, is it that bad? Scott paused. Then he said, the lab flagged something. Not the result, yet. The process? Jade contacted them this afternoon asking to change the mailing address for results. I felt my blood turn cold. Scott continued, they refused, because it violates protocol. But they noted the attempt. So that was it. She couldn't control the test itself, so she tried to control the result delivery. That night, Jade stayed over. She curled against me like she belonged there, like her warmth was proof of her honesty. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like the world's oldest fool. Around midnight, her phone buzzed. Again. This time, she didn't wake up. I didn't even hesitate. I picked it up. No passcode. She'd never removed it at my house. Maybe she thought I'd never dare. Maybe she thought affection made her safe. The message thread was open. The number wasn't saved, but I didn't need the name anymore. The texts weren't romantic. They weren't sexual. They were worse. They were logistical. Dates. Money amounts. Short directives. He's hooked. Prenup? I'll handle. Don't mention me. We need the result. Did you tell him yet? I scrolled up further. And there it was, the wow moment people talk about as if it's entertainment. A photo. Not a selfie. Not a joke. A photo of Jade standing in front of a building. Caleb's building. Then another message. He'll believe it's his. He wants a miracle. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I wanted to wake Jade up. I wanted to demand answers. Instead, I did something colder. I took screenshots. Every relevant message. Every date. Every amount. I sent them to myself, then deleted the sent confirmation from her phone. Then I put it back down and lay there, calm in a way that frightened me. Because in that moment, my grief over being lied to shifted into something else. Clarity. Caleb. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want my son to be part of this. But there were only two possibilities. Either someone under Caleb's plan was running a scam on me, or Caleb was. At 8 in the morning, I told Jade I had an early meeting and stepped outside. I called Caleb. He answered fast, like he'd been expecting a call, like his phone was already in his hand. I said, "Where are you?" He said, "At work." His voice was steady. Too steady. I didn't accuse him. Not yet. I said, "I need you to come by tonight. Family dinner. Just you." A pause. Then Caleb said, "Okay." After I hung up, I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel until my eyes burned. In my head, I replayed years of fatherhood, scraped knees, school projects, awkward talks, the day he drove off to college. And now this. That night, I cooked. Not because I felt hungry, but because I needed my hands doing something normal. Jade floated around my kitchen like she owned the place, humming quietly. She talked about baby furniture and how we could make space by moving some of my late wife's things into storage. I nodded like I hadn't heard anything. Caleb arrived at 7. He looked at Jade. Jade looked at him. And in that 1 second, just one, before their faces settled into polite smiles, I saw it. Recognition. Not, "Nice to meet you." Not, "We've met once or twice." Recognition like people who have history. Jade walked up to him and hugged him a little too quickly, like she was trying to appear comfortable. Caleb hugged her back. And I felt something in my chest crack, not loudly, but permanently. We ate dinner like an illusion. Forks clinking. Small talk. The weather. Work stress. Jade laughing in the right places. Then I poured 3 glasses of wine and said, "I want to make a toast." They both looked up. I lifted my glass and said, "To truth." Caleb blinked. Jade's smile held. I set my glass down without drinking. Then I stood, walked to the living room, and picked up a folder from the side table. In it were printouts of the screenshots. I came back, set them in the middle of the table, and pushed them toward Caleb first. I didn't say a word. I let him read. His face drained slowly, like someone watching their life fall apart in real time. Then I pushed the folder toward Jade. She didn't reach for it. She stared at it like it was a snake. The room went quiet in a way that was final. And then Caleb said my name, softly, like he was still hoping there was a misunderstanding. "Dad." That was the moment. The moment where my son chose what to say next. And the moment where I realized I wasn't just catching Jade in a lie. I was about to find out whether Caleb was still my son in any way that mattered. Caleb didn't touch the wine. His hands were on the table, palms down, like he needed to anchor himself. Jade sat very still. Her eyes moved between me and Caleb like she was calculating which direction the fire would spread. I kept my voice calm because if I let anger take the wheel, I'd crash into something irreversible. I said, "Explain." Caleb swallowed. His throat bobbed like a kid caught stealing, not a grown man with a career and a mortgage. He said, "It's not what you think." That sentence is universal. It's said in every betrayal story in every language. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I said, "Try again." Caleb's eyes flicked to Jade, just a glance, but it wasn't the glance of a man thinking independently. It was the glance of a man checking with someone else. Jade finally spoke, soft and urgent, like she could steer the narrative with tone. She said, "Martin, please." I held up my hand. I said, "Don't." The single word landed harder than yelling would've. Caleb inhaled, then said, "I met her months ago. She came into my life first." My stomach clenched. I didn't respond. He continued, "We dated. Not serious. Then she found out who you were." His voice cracked slightly at the end, like he was ashamed but also weirdly defensive. I said, and then what? Caleb's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He just looked trapped. He said, she said you were lonely. She said you'd never move on after Mom. She said you were sitting on all that money and you didn't even live. He took a breath. Then he said the part that still makes my skin go cold. He said, she said it would be easy. Jade's face tightened. She'd wanted Caleb to carry this without naming her as the architect. Caleb kept going, voice faster now, like confession was spilling out of him. He said, at first it was just jokes. Like, what if you got a girlfriend? What if you had someone? Then she said she could make you happy and it wouldn't hurt anyone. And then she said if you married her, she'd take care of you, and I'd eventually inherit it anyway. I stared at him. I said, so you decided to help her take it sooner. Caleb flinched. It wasn't like that. But his words didn't matter anymore. The shape of the truth was clear. Jade's voice went sharper, the softness breaking. She said, you're making me sound like a monster. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt something settle inside me. Not heartbreak. Disgust. I said, you used my grief like a door key. She opened her mouth again, but I didn't let her speak. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I said, the lab called Scott. They flagged your attempt to redirect results. Jade's eyes widened. Just a flash. I said, so no. You don't control this. Then I said, and you're not pregnant. Silence. Caleb's head snapped up. What? Jade's lips parted, and for the first time, she didn't have a ready expression. I continued, the clinic paperwork you gave me was fake. And the lab? They already had enough to verify you'd lied about the timeline. Jade's jaw clenched. You can't prove. I cut in. I can. But I don't have to. I stood and walked to the front door. I opened it. Cold air rolled in like a reset. I said, leave. Jade stayed seated, stunned. Caleb stared at me like he'd never seen me before. I said it again, quieter. Leave. Jade stood. She grabbed her coat with shaking hands. At the doorway, she tried one last tactic. She softened her face, made her voice tremble. She said, I did care about you. I didn't raise my voice. I said, no. You cared about what I had. She held my gaze for a second, like she was deciding whether anger or tears would work better. Then she left without another word. The door clicked shut. Caleb remained at the table. He looked smaller somehow, like the truth stripped something off him. He whispered, Dad, I'm sorry. And here's the part people don't want to hear in these stories, sometimes the betrayal isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just pathetic. I didn't punch him. I didn't throw things. I didn't scream. I sat back down and said, you're 35. Caleb's eyes filled. I said, you knew your mother. You watched what she meant to me. And you still helped someone try to hollow me out. He shook his head. I didn't think you'd fall that hard. That line hit me like a slap. Because it revealed what he'd assumed about me, that my need for love was something he could measure and manage. I said, you didn't think I was human. Caleb covered his face with his hands. He finally started crying, quiet and ugly. I let him. Then I said, here's what's going to happen. He looked up, eyes red. I said, I'm changing my will. Tonight. He flinched. I continued, I'm freezing the trust accounts that are tied to anything you can access. And you're paying back every dollar Jade took from me, because yes, I know about the consulting payments. He tried to speak, but I raised my hand. I said, you're also going to send her one message, from your phone, telling her the plan is dead and that you're done. No threats. No drama. Just a clean end. Caleb nodded, trembling. I added, and you're going to therapy. He looked shocked, like that was the most offensive part. I leaned forward. I said, not because I need you to become a better person for me. Because if you can justify doing this to your father, you'll justify worse to someone else. He swallowed hard and nodded again. The next day, Scott filed a restraining order. We sent Jade's previous settlement paperwork to the right people. We documented everything. 2 weeks later, Jade tried to contact me through a different number. I didn't respond. A month after that, I got word she'd moved again, another state, another, fresh start. And Caleb? He didn't get cut off completely. I didn't destroy my son. But I did something that felt like justice without becoming cruelty. I made him earn his way back into my life. He repaid the money in installments. He showed up when I asked. He stopped blaming Jade like she was a spellcaster who had hypnotized him, and started owning the fact that he'd chosen the easy path because it benefited him. It took time. It still takes time. The paternity test results came in eventually, clean and final, no pregnancy, no child, no miracle. Just a lie. But the real test wasn't the lab. It was what people did when they thought they could take something from me because I was old. Jade failed that test. Caleb did, too. And I passed it in the only way that mattered. I stopped begging my life to make sense. I made it make sense. By choosing truth over comfort. By choosing boundaries over loneliness. And by learning, painfully, that love doesn't prove itself with words. It proves itself with what someone refuses to do to you when they could.